tonight. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's begin with a presidential directive slashing the expenditure of official travels for domestic and international by 60%. The directive was handed down by President Bola Tinubu a few hours ago and was contained in a statement signed by the presidential spokesman, Ajuri Ngelale. Ngelale says the development will affect the office of the president, vice president, first lady, ministers and heads of agencies. On the interview segments for today, we focus on the scandal rocking the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs as President Bola Tinubu suspends the minister, Betta. And tonight we'll be speaking with Lanre Suraju, anti-corruption crusader and chairman Herder. Welcome to Politics Tonight, everyone. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. The discussion continues as President Bola Tinubu has now suspended the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Betta, over 585 billion naira scandal. The president has also directed the chairman of EFCC, Ola Olukoyede, to investigate all financial transactions involving the ministry and all agencies under it. Joining me for more insights into this developing story is Lanre Suraju, anti-corruption crusader. He's also chairman, Human and Environmental Development Agenda, Herder Resource Center. He's joining us via Zoom from Canada. Good evening from Lagos, and thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Suraju.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Right. So I'd like us to start this conversation by first looking into the reasons for the creation of this ministry by former President Muhammadu Buhari in 2019. To what end? For what purpose? Because lately there's been several conversations centered around the relevance of that ministry, and some persons are calling for President Bola Tinubu to scrap that ministry. And for what I have here, the mission and objective of that ministry is to develop humanitarian policies and provide effective coordination of national and international humanitarian interventions. So for a 4-year-old ministry, how do you describe what is going on in that ministry?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this is one of the most unfortunate situations that you have the level of governance in Nigeria where some good intention not only just misinterpreted or even misapplied or corrupted by what you can call not just Nigerian factor, because it is not all Nigerians that are criminally minded like many of the public office holders that we have around in the country, but by the criminal elements who find their way either in public service or political appointments. Unfortunately, most of the programs under that ministry were doing exceedingly well when it was more or less like an independent, a kind of independent intervention program and agencies under the office of the vice president. And for what we can consider possibly was the idea of having a properly coordinated under a ministry, which had its major fault, because this was intervention program that was designed to actually also connect and relate with state governments. And it was extremely difficult, if not impossible, to have governors submit to ministers, which was the #1 problem encountered by the minister and his intervention program. So rather than state governors submitting or even coordinating with the program through the office of the vice president, which is a superior office, and most governors would ordinarily also answer to some of the callings and invitation and the intervention of the office of the vice president. They were actually put under a ministry. And at that point, it became difficult for the governors to not only attend to programs or even calls or even honor visit by the coordinators of the program, unlike when you had it under the office of the vice president, when most of the governors were actually coordinating and then also relating freely with coordinators of the program. It went to this ministry and it became, rather than the original intersection, one of the first things that we saw was when the former minister, in a bid to curried the favor and support of the National Assembly, started doling out, allocation of, N Power program, the money payment, monitoring 5,000 money payment to parliamentarians in thousands, in hundreds to parliamentarians, to Senate presidents, and also this, the House of Reps leadership. And that was the number one major problem that compromised the not only the independence of the program, but the genuine intention that surrounded that intervention program, to the extent that she got so corrupted that she claimed that children were being fed under the school feeding program while the country was under lockdown, under COVID. And for getting away with that blue mother, and also till the end of that last regime, emboldened the woman to ride roughshod with almost every other person that has anything to say, to caution in whatever it is that must have happened, which led to the billions of naira that were misappropriated on that, under that humanitarian affair. Unfortunately, the current suspended, not anymore current, the recently suspended Minister of Humanitarian Affairs seems to have also been indoctrinated, not only by the predecessor in office, but more by the civil servants who are always also at the center of many of these corrupt practices. Unfortunately, our focus have always been on the politically appointed persons and exposed person, whereas these civil servants, just like the person who you had the 585 million naira transferred into private accounts, are always responsible for many of these corruption and atrocities, and they always also guide, the politically appointees on how to go about, the diversion of public funds. But this is sheer unfortunate development where innovative program that was meant to actually directly impact on the ordinary people. And this shows how callous many of these politicians and political office holders are. That the monies meant for the ordinary people are always easy for them to divert or steal.
Right. So why do you think this is a constant reoccurrence?
Because the level of independence of our institutions and at the same time, the commitment of some of the leadership of these institutions, especially the corruption prevention agencies and mechanisms, so actually live up to the billings and expectations. So unfortunately, these were issues originally for the institution like the Code of Conduct Bureau. And I wonder why the president is yet to see the need in actually reforming that agency and at the same time also repositioning it for the appropriate work. It's far, far cheaper for us to prevent corruption than actually to arrest and prosecute it. The Code of Conduct Bureau and Code of Conduct Tribunal would have actually expedited the process of identifying some of these corrupt practices and also people that are involved and prosecuted them within the reasonable time and have them also cautioned from going ahead with misappropriating public office funds. And the unfortunate also sad situation where the leadership of the Ministry of Justice, particularly under Malami as the Minister of Justice, who was also extremely accused of extreme cases of corruption, and we're still waiting for that to also happen under this regime, hampered the operations of all the anti-corruption agencies from actually delivering on their mandates, right from the EFCC to that Code of Conduct Bureau, and also interfere with the ICPC, but particularly with the EFCC. It was a battle royale between Mr. Ibrahim Magu and the Attorney General to actually get some of those corruption cases into court. And where you have that shield and cover from some of the supervisory ministry or minister, it becomes extremely difficult to get, corruption prosecuted. So what we would assume we're seeing is a new change where the EFCC is allowed to do his work. Actually, the EFCC chairman does not need the directive of the president to do the appropriate thing with the minister. And it was good that we saw that the NSIAP coordinator was invited by the EFCC without waiting for the directive of the president. It's a courtesy for the EFCC chairman to possibly inform the minister as a courtesy, inform the president as a form of courtesy before any of his appointee and also the minister, particularly of ministerial status, are actually invited so that the president doesn't feel embarrassed. So the president only needs to be informed by the EFCC, which I think was the case that also led to the invitation of the minister by the EFCC. So we would assume that what we're seeing is now a semblance of the operation of the anti-corruption agencies with the level of independence that is required. So we want to see also the anti-corruption agencies, as EFCC is doing now, ICPC, to start also taking on the high-profile person, and that is the way we need to see, the fight is against corruption cascading. So once you're able to take it off at that topmost level, where corruption is not what we have there, you still have corruption in the lower cadre. What you have at the higher level in Nigeria is actually impunity, where many of these characters would just act without any sense or any fear of any repercussion for their actions.
All right. So if time permits us, we will come back to how you think the president needs to strengthen some of these institutions. But going by the public outcry over this matter, many Nigerians have commended the president for his swift action in suspending the minister. Do you share the same opinion?
Oh yeah, so it's important that we really need to recognize some of those actions when they are taken, when they are done differently. This is how it's supposed to be done. In any sane country, we can only say that the president is not done anything exceptional, but he has acted to the expectation of Nigerians and also to the dictate of the law. But we need to recognize it, that he has actually acted in that line where others have acted otherwise. So that, which was what I said, what we're seeing is more or less like the independence of the anti-corruption agencies to actually also investigate some of these political appointees without them having the cover. And I can assume that a lot of the kind of pressure that the EFCC chairman must have undergone in actually doing this. There would have been so many other ministers, even possibly people in the character or the status of the chief of staff, Senate president, and all manners of people who must have been calling to try and dissuade him from going ahead with this level of action. So the statement from the president then also comes to give some measure of political cover for the actions of the EFCC as an agency, and at the same time would want to also warn some of the political appointees and others who would want to influence otherwise the activities of the anti-corruption agencies. So I think it's a commendable effort, but this is just also some things that we need to see. And for me, it is not just going to be limited, it shouldn't be limited to even the federal level. We have worst cases of corruption happening at the state level and also at the local government level. The anti-corruption agencies must also beam the searchlight at this level of government and also at the other tiers of government in the National Assembly and also the judiciary.
All right, fantastic. Now, the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Betta, and Umar Sadiya Farouk, as well as Betta, like I mentioned earlier, have been invited by the EFCC. What are your expectations?
My expectations are that they would just have to not only answer for many of the allegations. So it is not just limited to what we read on the pages of newspaper. Some of them are from information from whistleblowers. Some of them are also part of the statements issued by the EFCC to say that investigations are ongoing. And some of them are also conjectures, by some media houses who can, quite a number of reporters don't have information before they report. They can just sit down also in their sitting room to concoct stories and reports. So it's not everything that you want to also take seriously from as they come from the news report. So what my expectations is that simply that the law enforcement agencies and now EFCC is leading it, would do a thorough investigation, and this would have to go to the public. It's important, and I'm happy that the anti-corruption agencies are also watching and listening to some of these your programs. Is that there's been the clear indication and allegation and reliable information to the extent that the ministries and agencies are in the habit of subverting the financial regulations by not operating some of their financial transactions through the Treasury single account. And this is done usually towards the end of the year. So because they want to make sure that all the padded funds in the approved budget are spent before the end of the operational period and lifespan of that budget, particularly around December, they always find justification to operate this kind of, illegal account transfer of public funds from public accounts to private accounts, just like you saw Betty Edu did with the humanitarian affairs. So it is not just humanitarian affairs, it is across all the ministries. So the anti-corruption agencies, with these developments, is to not deal with this as an isolated case, but to see it clearly as the now operating standard of many of the civil servants, the DFA, the permanent secretary, the director of whatever, and auditors in the ministries, departments, and agencies. And they need to have all these comprehensive review and investigation of all these MDAs and funds that were moved from public accounts to individual accounts to have a proper scrutiny. And if that is what we're going to do for the next 1 year, using the Farouk experience and now Betty Edu's experience to deal holistically with the infractions that we have in the financial operations of the MDAs, I think that would be a very good way to actually stamp out corruption in public service and also reduce the opportunities and propensity for diversion of public funds.
And to add to that, based on all of these issues you've raised and some other issues tied to this story, there are those who are also calling for the president to dig deeper into these other ministries and agencies because, according to their opinion, many of these appointees and elected public office holders have companies that are beneficiaries of government contracts. What do you say to this?
Oh, yes, inevitably. I mean, this is what what I mentioned earlier, and that is where you find the Code of Conduct Bureau missing. There's rarely any public office holder who is capable of declaring asset acquired outside the legitimate earnings in their asset declaration. And a very strong collaborative work between the Code of Conduct Bureau, the Financial Intelligence Unit, and any of the anti-corruption agencies would have identified easily many of these assets. Quite a number of these public office holders are also responsible for the failing value of the naira because they have, perfected the act of not operating many of their transactions in naira. They don't collect bribes in naira anymore. They don't even keep their monies in the bank. So they always have those money kept in dollars and in their house and in safe keeps around. And unfortunately, this was actually going to be seriously exposed with the coming into office of the last administration when the whistleblower policy was formulated. And you could see how, whistleblowing was revealing, funds hidden in cabinets and in undergrounds everywhere by politically exposed persons, public servants, head of MDAs, including also head of security agencies. But the Ministry of Justice under Malami mismanaged and corrupted that process to the extent that, whistleblowers were shortchanged. Some of them were exposed also to adverse, consequences from the victims of the whistleblowing, to the extent that, people stopped, providing that information. And that policy would have exposed quite a whole lot of this that are happening with a lot of people, undertaking some of these activities. So with the effective, repositioning of the Code of Conduct Bureau and also the NFIU, we would really see a whole impact that would reduce, what we experience currently.
Right. So I'm sure you're aware that the suspended minister in a tweet on X defended herself, saying her image and that of the ministry will not be tarnished. What's your take on this?
She's not the one to determine that. I mean, she's not in a position to also determine that. It is the outcome of the investigation that will tell that. So that's just like her trying to hang on to the last possible straw. That's completely gone. She indicted herself. She clearly, the letter is there, so there's no way she can defend. There's no way any public office holder can defend, instructing the payment of public fund into a private account, which is not for what the purpose that it was meant to serve, the private account of a public servant. That is an automatic indictment for her. So it's only in Nigeria that you can hear someone actually making such a very ridiculous statement. She should by now be apologizing to Nigeria for, committing such harakiri. I mean, that is actually not just even an offense against even just an indictment of a regulation. That is a financial regulation act, that's the Financial Responsibility Act that she has breached. That is a law of the land that she has breached, and she's already even on the prima facie of the evidence that we have that she signed. She signed it. She's stand indicted from that action and also the infraction that committed.
All right. So before I let you go tonight, Mr. Suraju, President Bola Tinubu is known as a man with an eye for talent. Would you say he made a mistake in appointing Betta as a minister in his cabinet?
Well, I know there will be quite a number of mistakes. Buhari also made such a huge mistake with a whole lot of misfits that actually found their way into the cabinet. Unfortunately, these are the situations where you have, quite a number of political appointees, coming into office based on recommendation, based on, state consideration, based on, political affiliation, and so forth, so on and so forth. But the most disheartening aspect for me is where you see, these young people that will think will change things differently from the adults, from the old generation that have brought the country to this level, also displaying, if not even worse, sense of low morality, low dignity, low self-esteem, to the extent that you are only not just caught in this kind of act, but you're found trying to also make justification for it. So there will be so many of them to be reviewed. But the good thing that can actually also help in reducing, the level of embarrassment for the president is his ability to wield the big stick just like he's done with Betta. If the Minister of Interior, I'm also so disappointed that's someone that I thought was also doing some fantastic work, and also trying to do
Mr. Suraju, would you also say this is some setback for women in politics? Quickly, 30 seconds.
No, I actually don't want to also do that to the women, because I know there's a whole lot of women doing fantastic job in advocacy for, gender equity, women adequate representation. So that I wouldn't want to measure the capacity of women. There are quite a number of them.
Thank you so much.
And others, but there are others doing fantastic work, on behalf of the women. So she's just represented herself and our family with this.
Thank you so much. While that case has been investigated, we'll continue to monitor the developments. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. Lanre Suraju, anti-corruption crusader, thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thanks a lot for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. See you tomorrow.